I saw that.
I saw that.
You're not paralyzed.
You should be careful with assumptions.
I confirm patterns. Patterns.
Things are changing. Sit down. Something doesn't add up.
Then keep watching.
We need a new plan.
So that's it.
I confirm patterns. The chairman's time is over.
Careful.
This was left on purpose. They want us to react. Let's see what you do.
You're not ordinary.
Neither are you.
The glass shattered before anyone could react. The sound cut through the office like a gunshot. Her hand froze midair. She hadn't meant to drop the glass that hard. But she wasn't looking at the glass anymore. She was staring at his hand. It had moved, not a twitch, not a reflex, a controlled movement, slow, deliberate, alive. The most feared man in Seoul, the man everyone believed was paralyzed, had just adjusted his fingers. She didn't breathe, didn't blink, didn't move. Because the moment she did, it would confirm something dangerous, very dangerous. His eyes shifted, locked onto hers, cold, sharp, fully aware, not the eyes of a helpless man, not even close. She swallowed, then spoke, her voice low, steady, but edged with something heavier than fear. I saw that. Silence. The air tightened. For 3 full seconds, nothing happened. Then his fingers relaxed again. Limp, still, like nothing ever happened, like she imagined it. But she didn't look away, didn't step back, didn't apologize. Instead, she took one slow step closer. You can pretend for them, she said quietly, her gaze unwavering. But don't insult me. Still nothing. Then very slowly the corner of his mouth moved, not a smile, something sharper. Something dangerous, and that's when she knew. She had just crossed a line no one survived, cut to black 3 weeks earlier. The city feared his name, they didn't say it out loud. They didn't need to, because power like his didn't require noise. Chairman Kang didn't rule through chaos, he ruled through control, every move calculated. Every enemy erased before they even realized they were a threat. His empire stretched across legitimate corporations and shadows no one dared investigate. And then he was paralyzed, one night. One attack, no witnesses, no clear explanation. Just one truth that spread like wildfire: the most dangerous man in Korea could no longer walk. And just like that, the balance of power shifted. Inside the organization, silence turned into whispers. Whispers turned into questions, and questions turned into ambition. Because power doesn't disappear, it gets claimed. You're new, the voice was sharp, dismissive. She didn't look up immediately. She finished placing the files neatly on the desk before responding. Yes. Finally, she met his eyes, calm, unbothered. Which clearly irritated him more. He leaned back slightly, studying her like she didn't belong. You don't look like you understand where you are. She held his gaze. I understand enough. A pause. Then a small scoff. You're a secretary, he said flatly. Don't confuse that with importance. She didn't react, didn't defend herself, didn't shrink. She simply replied, noted, and went back to her work. That was the first thing they all noticed about her. She didn't try to prove anything, didn't argue, didn't compete. And somehow that made them more uncomfortable than if she did, because people who stayed quiet usually saw more than they should. From across the room, Chairman Kang sat in his wheelchair. Still. Silent, watching, always watching. His presence alone kept the room from falling into complete disorder. Even now, even like this. Meetings continued, decisions were made, orders were given. But something had changed. There were delays now, hesitations, side glances, and she noticed all of it, every single crack. That afternoon, she stood behind him, reviewing documents. Close enough to hear his breathing. Steady, controlled, too controlled. Someone entered, fast footsteps, urgent. Sir, we have an issue with Busan. No response. The man hesitated. Then continued, voice tighter. One of our shipments was intercepted. Still nothing. Then a flicker so small most people would miss it, but she didn't. His eyes shifted, not randomly, precisely. Toward the man speaking, assessing, calculating, alive. She lowered her gaze quickly, pretending to focus on the papers, but her mind was already moving. Something wasn't right. That night she stayed late. Long after the others had left, the building was quiet, too quiet. She stood outside his office door, hand resting lightly against the handle, thinking, replaying. Every detail, every movement, every inconsistency. Then she pushed the door open, slowly. He was exactly where she left him, in the chair, motionless, but she didn't go to her desk. She walked straight toward him, each step measured. Intentional, she stopped in front of him, close enough to test something. Without warning, she dropped a stack of files. They hit the ground hard. Loud, sharp, echoing. His eyes didn't flinch. But his hand, there it was again, that almost invisible adjustment. Control, not reflex. Her heart pounded, but her face didn't change. Instead, she crouched down slowly, gathering the papers, and softly said, just loud enough for him to hear, "You're very good." A pause. Then she added, "But not perfect." Silence filled the room again, heavy, dangerous. Then his voice, low, calm, the first time she had ever heard it directed at her. "You should be careful with assumptions." She didn't look up. "I don't make assumptions." Another pause, then she stood, placing the files back on the desk, neatly, precisely. And finally met his eyes again. "I confirm patterns." For a split second, something shifted. Interest, not anger, not yet, interest, and that was worse. Because men like him didn't get interested in people. They eliminated risks, and she had just made herself one. The next morning, the tension in the building had changed. It was sharper. More aggressive, word had spread. Internal conflict was no longer subtle. Two senior members were now openly disagreeing during meetings, voices raised, respect thinning. "And you expect us to just sit and wait," one of them snapped, "while everything falls apart?" "Watch your tone," the other shot back. "Or what?" he challenged. "He can't even," the room froze. Silence, thick, dangerous. No one finished that sentence. No one needed to, because everyone knew what he meant. And for the first time, Chairman Kang's authority felt fragile. She stood quietly at the side, observing, processing. Then she noticed something else. The man who spoke, too bold, too careless, or too confident, as if he knew something others didn't. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and for the first time, she wasn't just observing anymore. She was starting to understand. This wasn't just a power struggle. This was a setup. And the man in the wheelchair wasn't the victim. He was waiting, watching, testing, and now so was she. The first mistake they made was underestimating her. The second was assuming she was alone. By the end of the week, the tension inside the organization had turned into something sharper, something reckless. Voices were louder, meetings were shorter. And loyalty was starting to look negotiable. She noticed who stopped making eye contact with the chairman, who spoke too quickly, who avoided certain topics. And most importantly, who seemed too comfortable. That man from before, the one who almost said it out loud. His name was Min Yi, senior lieutenant, close to the chairman for over a decade, trusted. Respected and recently careless. "You're watching him again." The voice came from behind her, calm, controlled. She didn't turn immediately. "You're talking," she replied quietly, still focused on the room ahead. A faint pause, then, "So are you." Now she turned slightly, just enough. Chairman Kang sat exactly as always, still. Expression unreadable, but his eyes, they were on her, sharp, aware, very aware. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "He talks too much." A brief silence. "Then he always has." She shook her head slightly. "No, not like this." Another pause, longer this time. Then, "What do you think changed?" She didn't answer immediately. Because this wasn't a question, it was a test. So instead she asked, "Do you want my observation or the truth?" For the first time, a flicker of something darker crossed his eyes. "The difference," she leaned in slightly. "Observation keeps me safe." A beat. "The truth puts me at risk." Silence, heavy, then speak. One word, permission, or a trap, maybe both. She didn't hesitate. "He thinks you're already gone." The room felt colder, but she continued. "And not just physically." A pause. "He thinks you've lost control." Across the room, Min Yi laughed at something someone said, too relaxed, too confident. She glanced at him briefly, then back at the chairman. "And people like him don't get bold unless they believe the outcome is already decided." Another silence, longer, deeper. Then, "You're assuming intent." She met his gaze. "I'm recognizing momentum." That did it. Something shifted again, not just interest this time, acknowledgement. And that was dangerous, because now she wasn't just a risk, she was becoming useful. Later that night, she was called into his office. No announcement, no explanation, just a message. "Come." She entered without hesitation, closed the door behind her, and waited. The room was dim. "Quiet still, then. You've been paying attention." She didn't respond because, again, not a question, a statement. You noticed the shift. Yes, and she stepped forward slightly, careful. Measured, they're not just testing limits anymore. A pause. They're positioning. His eyes didn't leave her. For what? She held his gaze. For when you're no longer a factor. Silence. Then a soft sound, not from the chair, from him, a low exhale, almost like amusement, but not quite. And you're comfortable saying that to me? She didn't flinch. You asked. Another pause. Then what would you do? This time it was a real question. She felt it, the weight of it, so she answered carefully. You don't stop them. A flicker of interest again. You let them move. His eyes narrowed slightly. Explain. She stepped closer, not intimidated, not hesitant. They're exposing themselves right now. A beat. If you interrupt that, they retreat. Another step. But if you let them believe they're winning, she stopped, right in front of him. They'll make a mistake they can't take back. Silence, heavy. Then, and you think you can identify that moment? She didn't smile, didn't hesitate. I already have. That changed everything. The air shifted, sharper now, more dangerous. Who? One word, direct. Cold, she held his gaze. Not yet. That was bold, too bold, and she knew it, because for the first time the room felt like it might snap. You're testing me. His voice was lower now, not louder. More controlled, which made it worse. She didn't deny it. Yes. A long silence followed, the kind that stretched just enough to become uncomfortable. Then something happened, slowly, deliberately. His hand moved, not a twitch, not subtle, clear, controlled, alive, and this time he didn't hide it. Her eyes dropped to it, then back to his face. No surprise, no fear, just confirmation. You wanted me to see that, she said quietly. Yes. No denial, no hesitation, truth. Finally, she nodded once. Then I'll stop pretending too. That caught him off guard, just slightly, but enough. Because in that moment, the dynamic shifted again, not equal, not even close, but no longer one-sided. You're either very smart, he said slowly, or very reckless. She met his gaze without blinking. Those are usually the same thing. A pause, then a decision. You'll report directly to me. Not a suggestion, an order. But different from the others, more intentional. And if I refuse, his eyes darkened slightly. You won't. She considered him for a second, then nodded. Under one condition. That again, push. Test, dangerous, but he didn't stop her. Say it. I don't lie for you. Silence, then. I don't need you to lie. A beat. I need you to see. She held his gaze. That I can do. And just like that, the alliance was formed, not built on trust, not yet, but on something far more volatile, mutual usefulness. The next few days changed everything. She moved differently now, not visibly, but strategically. She asked fewer questions, listened more, watched everything, and slowly patterns started connecting. Min-Yi wasn't acting alone. That much became clear. There were others, subtle, careful, but aligned, and then she heard it, by accident, or maybe not, a conversation, low voices behind a half-closed door. We don't have much time. That doesn't matter, he's finished. You're sure? A pause, then I made sure of it. Her body went still, every sense sharpened. Because that sentence, that wasn't confidence. That was confirmation. And suddenly this wasn't just a power play anymore. This was something deeper, something planned, something already in motion. She stepped back silently, heart steady, mind racing, and for the first time she realized something critical. The chairman wasn't the only one setting a trap. Someone else had already made their move, and if she was right, they were all already inside it. She didn't report it immediately. That was the difference between panic and strategy. Instead, she waited, watched, listened more carefully than before, because if someone said, I made sure of it, then whatever they did, it had already happened. And if it had already happened, then reacting too early would expose them. The next morning, everything looked normal, too normal. Meetings continued, voices steady, faces controlled. But underneath, something had shifted. Min-Yi walked in like he owned the room, not loud, not arrogant, just certain. That kind of certainty only came from one place, a finished plan. She stood behind Chairman Kang as usual, reviewing documents. But her attention wasn't on the papers. It was on the room, on Min-Yi, on the others. And then it happened. Chairman, Min-Yi said calmly, stepping forward, we need to discuss restructuring. The word landed heavy. Restructuring, that wasn't a suggestion, that was a move. The room went quiet. Everyone was listening now. Waiting, watching. She glanced at the chairman, still silent, unmoving, but she knew better now. So she leaned slightly closer and whispered, he's starting. A fraction of a second, that's all it took. His fingers shifted just once. A signal, he understood. Min Yi continued, his tone measured. With respect, the current situation has created vulnerabilities. No one interrupted him. No one dared, but no one stopped him either. And I believe it would be in the organization's best interest to begin transitioning certain responsibilities. There it was, clear, direct, calculated. He wasn't asking, he was positioning. She stepped forward slightly, not enough to draw attention, just enough to feel the tension more clearly. Min Yi's eyes flicked toward her briefly. Dismissive, he didn't see her as a threat. That would be his mistake. And who? The chairman's voice finally cut through the room, calm and low. Do you suggest takes on these responsibilities? Silence. Then Min Yi smiled, small. Controlled, I'm willing to step in where needed. There it was, out in the open, no more pretending, no more subtlety. He was making his move. The room felt like it was holding its breath. Waiting for a reaction, for rejection, for punishment, but none came. Instead, very well. 2 words, that was all, and just like that, everything changed. Min Yi bowed his head slightly, hiding the satisfaction in his eyes. Thank you, Chairman. The meeting continued, but it didn't matter anymore. The shift had already happened. Afterward, the room emptied slowly. No one spoke about it, but everyone felt it. The balance had tilted. She followed Chairman Kang back into his office, closed the door behind them, and turned to him immediately. That was too easy. He didn't respond right away. Then, was it? She stepped closer. Yes, a pause. He expected resistance. Another step. You gave him permission. Silence. Then, and what did that give us? She held his gaze. Confidence. A beat. Too much of it. He watched her carefully. Explain. She didn't hesitate. He's accelerating. Her voice was sharper now, more certain. He thinks he's already won. Another step. And people who think they've already won, she stopped, right in front of him. Stop being careful. Silence, then a slow nod. Good, that caught her off guard, just slightly. You wanted that? His eyes didn't leave hers. I needed that. A pause. He won't expose everything if he thinks there's still a risk. She exhaled quietly, understanding now. You're pushing him. Yes, to make a mistake. A faint shift in his expression. Not a mistake, a beat. A commitment. That landed because there was a difference. A mistake could be denied. A commitment couldn't be taken back. Before she could respond, a knock on the door. Sharp, urgent, enter. The door opened quickly. One of the lower-ranking members stepped in, visibly tense. Sir, we have a situation. Her eyes narrowed. What kind of situation? She asked before the chairman could speak. The man hesitated. Then one of our storage facilities was raided. Silence, cold, immediate. By who? She asked. We don't know, a pause, but they knew exactly where to go. That was enough, inside job, no question. She turned to the chairman, but he was already looking at her. And in that look there was confirmation. The game had moved forward. Fast, too fast. Min Yi? She asked quietly. Too obvious, he replied. She frowned slightly. Then who? A beat. Then that's what we find out. The man in front of them shifted nervously. Sir, there's more. Her attention snapped back. What? He swallowed. They didn't just take the inventory. A pause. They left something. Silence, heavy, dangerous. What? She asked again. The man hesitated. Then a message. That changed everything, because this wasn't just theft anymore. This was communication. A statement. Bring it. Minutes later, the object sat on the desk. Small, simple, but deliberate. She stared at it. Then spoke slowly. This isn't random. No, the chairman agreed. It's not. She looked up at him. They want you to see this. A pause, to react. His gaze hardened slightly. And what do you think we should do? She didn't hesitate. Nothing. Silence, then nothing, he repeated. She nodded. They're watching. A beat. If we react, we confirm they hit the right place. Another pause. But if we do, her voice lowered slightly. They start wondering what they missed. That did it. Another shift, another level. Good. He leaned back slightly, still in the chair, still playing the role. But now the strategy was evolving, because this wasn't just about exposing traitors anymore. This was about outplaying someone who was already moving, and whoever that someone was, they were bold, careful, and very, very close. Later that night, she couldn't shake the feeling. Something didn't add up. Min Yi was ambitious. Yes, but this felt bigger, more controlled, more precise, so she went back to the hallway, to that same door, and waited. It didn't take long. Voices again, different this time. He didn't react. Of course he didn't. A pause. Then what now? Silence. Then a voice she hadn't expected. Calm, familiar, too familiar. We moved to the next phase. Her heart dropped. because she knew that voice, not Min Yi, not anyone obvious, someone quieter, someone overlooked. Someone who had been in the room the entire time without ever drawing attention, and suddenly everything made sense. This was Min Yi's plan, he was just part of it. Which meant the real enemy hadn't stepped forward yet. And when they did, it wouldn't be obvious, it would be devastating. She didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't even blink. Because the moment she reacted, she would give herself away. That voice, she knew it. Not because it was loud, not because it stood out, but because it didn't. It was the kind of voice people ignored. The kind that stayed quiet in meetings. The kind that never challenged, never led, never stood in the spotlight. And that was exactly why it was dangerous. Timing matters, the voice continued calmly behind the door. We don't rush this. Another voice, lower, uneasy. What about Min Yi? A brief pause, then he's useful. Cold, simple, disposable. Her chest tightened slightly, so she was right. Min Yi wasn't the mastermind, he was a distraction, a visible threat to hide the real one. And the secretary? The second voice asked. Silence. Just for a second, but it was enough, because now she knew she was already on their radar. Watch her, the calm voice said finally, closely. Her fingers curled slightly at her side, not fear. Focus, because that changed the game completely. She stepped back quietly, soundless, gone before the door opened. By the time footsteps echoed into the hallway, she was already turning the corner. Calm, composed, like she had never been there, but her mind was moving fast. Very fast. The next morning, everything felt sharper, more dangerous, because now she knew there were two layers to this. The visible threat and the real one, and only one of them knew she was watching. She entered the office without hesitation. Chairman Kang was already there, waiting. He didn't ask, didn't speak. He just looked at her and she understood. You were right, she said quietly, a slight shift in his gaze. About. There's another one. Silence. Then who? She shook her head slightly. I don't have a name. A pause, but I have a pattern. That was enough to hold his attention. Explain. She stepped closer, lowered her voice. They don't lead. A beat. They guide. Another step. They stay close to the center, but never in it. His eyes narrowed slightly. Go on. They let others take risks. Her voice sharpened. Like Min Yi. A pause. Which means, she met his gaze directly, they've been in the room every time. Silence, heavy, then a realization, subtle but they're inside my inner circle. Yes, no hesitation. No doubt that was the truth, and it landed hard. Because that level of access, that level of patience, that wasn't ambition, that was strategy, long-term, calculated, dangerous. What do you suggest? He asked. This time there was no test in his voice, just focus. She answered immediately. We don't expose them. A pause. We isolate them. His gaze sharpened. How? She took a breath. Then we create pressure. A beat. Controlled pressure. Another step. We force them to act faster than they want to. Silence. Then, and when they do, her voice dropped slightly, they reveal themselves. That was the plan, simple but risky, because pushing someone like that could backfire badly. But doing nothing was worse. Do it, he said, no hesitation, no doubt. The next move had begun, and this time she was leading it. The changes were subtle at first. Assignments shifted. Information was delayed. Access was limited, nothing obvious, nothing direct, but enough to create friction, and friction creates mistakes. Min Yi noticed first, of course he did. His frustration was immediate, visible. Why wasn't I informed about this? He snapped during a meeting. She didn't look at him. I assumed you were occupied, she replied calmly. His jaw tightened. That's not your decision to make. She met his gaze briefly. You're right. A pause. Next time I'll inform you. Simple, neutral, but it did exactly what she wanted. It irritated him. Because it wasn't resistance, it was control. And he could feel it slipping. Across the room, someone else was watching. Quiet, still. And that's who she was really paying attention to. 3 days. That's all it took. 3 days of pressure, 3 days of subtle disruption, 3 days of watching people adjust. And then it happened. Another hit. Cleaner this time, more precise. Another internal asset compromised. No signs of forced entry. No witnesses, no noise, just absence and a message. Again, but this time different, more direct. She stood over the table, staring at it, then spoke quietly. They're getting impatient. Behind her, Chairman Kang's voice was calm, or confident. She shook her head slightly. No, a beat. This is reaction. She turned to him. We're affecting them. That meant one thing, they were close, very close. Good, he said, but she didn't feel good because pressure worked both ways. And if they were pushing the enemy was pushing back. Harder. That night she stayed again, later than usual, going over everything, every detail, every shift, every reaction. Looking for the break, the moment something didn't align, and then she saw it. Not in a conversation, not in a report, in timing, one person had been present for every critical moment. Every discussion, every shift in strategy, but never spoke, never contributed, never stood out, invisible, perfectly placed. Her pulse slowed because now she had it, not a guess, not a pattern. A target. The next morning she walked into the office differently, more certain, more focused, and when she looked at him he saw it immediately. "You found them." Not a question, she nodded once. "Yes," a pause. "Who?" She held his gaze and said the name, silence, heavy, unavoidable, because it wasn't who he expected, not even close, which made it worse. Because it meant they had been closer than either of them realized. And now the game was about to end. But not quietly, not cleanly, and definitely not safely. The name didn't leave her mouth loudly, but it hit harder than anything else in the room. For a moment, even Chairman Kang didn't move, didn't react. Because some truths weren't shocking because they were impossible, they were shocking because they made too much sense. "You're sure?" he asked quietly. She didn't hesitate. "Yes." A pause. "Then they've been there every time." Another beat. "Close enough to hear everything." His gaze darkened slightly. "And quiet enough to never be noticed." She nodded. "That's why it worked." Silence settled between them, heavy, final, because once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. "What's the move?" he asked, direct, focused, no hesitation. She stepped closer. Her voice lower now, controlled. "We end it." A pause, but not privately. His eyes flickered slightly. "Explain." She met his gaze. "They've been hiding behind silence." A beat. "Take that away." Another step. "We expose them where they feel safest." The room, the organization, everyone watching, that was the point. Because people like that didn't fear confrontation, they feared exposure. A long silence followed. Then, "Set it up." That was all he said, but it was enough, because now there was no turning back. That night everything was put in motion. A full meeting was called, mandatory attendance. No excuses, no delays, and the message was clear: something important was about to happen. The room filled quickly the next day. Tension sat in every corner. Min Yi stood near the front, calm, confident, still believing he was in control. That was about to change. She stood beside Chairman Kang, quiet, composed, watching, always watching, and then the meeting began. "Before we proceed," she said, her voice cutting clean through the room, "there's something everyone needs to understand." Heads turned, eyes narrowed, attention locked, perfect. She stepped forward slightly. No notes, no hesitation. "We've had internal breaches." A pause. "You all know that." No one spoke, but everyone listened. "The assumption has been," she glanced briefly at Min Yi, "that the threat was obvious." A faint shift in the room, people were starting to feel it. "That it was loud." Another step. "Aggressive." Her voice sharpened slightly. "Easy to identify." Min Yi's expression tightened just a little. "Good. But that assumption," she let the silence stretch, "was wrong." Now the room was completely still, because this wasn't going where they expected. The real threat, her eyes moved slowly across the room, deliberate, precise, was never the one speaking. A pause. It was the one listening. And that's when it hit them, not all at once, but enough. Confusion, tension, realization. She turned and looked directly at them. The real one still, silent, exactly where they always were. "You've been very careful," she said calmly. No response, of course not. "That's what made you effective." A step closer. "You let others take risks." Another step. "You let them be seen." Min Yi shifted slightly now, uncomfortable, because he was starting to understand too. "And all this time," she stopped. "Right in front of them. You were the one moving everything." Silence. Then a soft exhale, not fear, not panic, acceptance. Finally they spoke. "You're smarter than I expected." The room froze. Because now everyone heard it, everyone saw it. The truth. Min Yi's head snapped toward them. "You." Too late, way too late. "I didn't think you'd figure it out this quickly," they continued calmly. No denial, no panic, just control, but she didn't react, didn't celebrate, didn't hesitate. "Because you thought I was just a secretary." A beat. "They all did." Her voice didn't rise, didn't need to because it already landed. Hard, the room shifted, the power was changing. "You used him," she said, nodding slightly toward Min Yi. "A distraction." Min Yi stepped back slightly, anger rising. "You set me up." They didn't even look at him. "Don't be dramatic." Cold. dismissive, final. That was the moment everything broke. Min Yi lunged forward but stopped, because suddenly the room wasn't on his side anymore. Guards moved, positions shifted. And for the first time, he realized he was never in control, not even close. She stepped back slowly, calm, composed, and then it happened. The moment, the one everything had been building toward. Chairman Kang stood up. No warning, no hesitation, just stood. The sound of the chair shifting echoed louder than anything else, because it wasn't just movement, it was truth. The room froze. Completely shock, pure shock, because the impossible was happening right in front of them. "You," someone whispered, but no one finished it because they couldn't. He stepped forward, slow. Controlled, powerful, not a trace of weakness, not a single hint of hesitation. And just like that, the illusion was gone, the lie was over, and the power was back where it belonged. "You were all so focused," he said calmly, his voice steady, "on what I couldn't do," a pause, "that you never questioned what I was doing." No one moved, no one spoke. Because now there was nothing left to say. The game was over. The real enemy was exposed. Min Yi collapsed into silence, the mastermind finally visible. And her standing right at the center of it all. Not hidden, not underestimated, not anymore. Later, the building felt different, quieter, cleaner, like something heavy had been removed. She stood by the window looking out at the city, calm, still processing. "You changed the outcome." His voice came from behind her. She didn't turn. "No." A pause. "I changed the timing." He stepped closer. "You saw what no one else did." She glanced at him slightly. "They weren't looking." Silence. "Then you could stay." A beat. "Not as a secretary." She finally turned now, met his gaze. "And what would I be?" A small pause, then something more dangerous. She held his eyes for a second. Then a faint, almost invisible smile. "Maybe I already am." Silence settled between them, but it wasn't tense anymore. It was something else, something unfinished, because this wasn't an ending. It was a shift, and people like them, they didn't stop. They evolved. If you made it this far, you already know this wasn't just a story about power, it was about perception. About underestimating the wrong person. So tell me in the comments, at what point did you realize the boss wasn't really paralyzed? And more importantly, did you catch the real mastermind before the reveal? If you enjoyed this kind of story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone who loves intense, unpredictable stories like this. Because the next one will be even deeper.